the July 6, 2023 edition of the Metro Council Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. One of the new structures of our committee is that we open with a public comment period. No one signed up for the public comment period. Therefore, we will move on to resolutions. And so I will have the following resolutions on the consent agenda as I will call them out by number. And if you want to have any of them pulled, let me know at the end, and then I'll read the captions, and you'll have another opportunity to pull them at that point in time. RS 2023-2287, 2301, 2302, 2303, 2304, 2305, 2306. Those are resolutions that are on the consent agenda. Do any of those need to be pulled at this time? Okay, I will read the captions. RS 2023-2287, pulling other sponsors. Request the Department of Water and Sewage Services, Waste Services Division study creation of a department or other entity dedicated to solid waste reduction, diversion, and disposal responsibilities, and to develop a strategy and organizational framework that manages solid waste, recyclables, organics, and other materials for the residents of Nashville and Davidson County to fulfill the zero waste master plan. RS 2023-2301, Toombs and other sponsors, approves an intergovernmental agreement by and between TDOT and NDOT for the repair and existing pavement failures and resurfacing of 0.830 miles of Clarksville Pike / Dr. D.B. Todd Jr. Boulevard. RS 2023-2302, Roten and other sponsors, approves an application for a charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grant from TDOT to NDOT to replace, upgrade, and install new electric vehicle charging systems at various site locations throughout Nashville. RS 2023-2303, Welsh and other sponsors, approves Amendment 2 to an intergovernmental agreement between TDOT and NDOT for the intersection improvements on Nolensville Pike from McNally Drive to Natchez Court. RS 2023-2304, Roten and other sponsors, authorize the Metropolitan Department of Water and Sewage Services to enter into a recycling technology pilot program with Senseneo and to accept a donation of $14,000 for hardware integration, temporary licensing, and services associated with the program. RS 2023-2305, Roten and other sponsors, approves an application for a community project fund congressionally directed spending grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to Metro Nashville Water and Sewage Services Department to help replant Nashville's diminishing tree canopy and retain all the benefits it provides. RS 2023-2306, Sledge and other sponsors, amends ordinance number BL 2021-1020 to authorize the Metropolitan Government to modify the abandonment and acceptance of public water mains, fire hydrants, assemblies, and easements for properties located at 1201 Hillside Avenue. That is the consent agenda. Do any of those items need to be pulled? Yes, Councilmember Hurt.
Yes, I'd like to pull 2287 and 2304.
2287 and 2304. Okay. Any others? Councilmember Henderson. That's right, you're on that row. Sorry.
2302, Chair, just for a brief question. Thank you.
Okay. Any others? All right, so any discussion on the consent agenda? No further discussion. All in favor of the consent agenda, say aye. Any opposed, no. Consent agenda passes. So let's begin with RS 2023-2287, pulling other sponsors. Request the Department of Water and Sewage Services, Waste Services Division study creation of a department or other entity dedicated to solid waste reduction, diversion, and disposal responsibilities, and to develop a strategy and organizational framework that manages solid waste, recyclables, organics, and other materials for the residents of Nashville and Davidson County to fulfill the zero waste master plan. Do I have a motion? Moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Hurt, you have a question or a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to figure out how the idea of creating another department is had been decided, and who's going to run the department, what the cost related to this are, and whose decision was it?
Let me turn to the administration.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Council Lady. I'm a tag team here with Kendra Apkowitz from our office. So just brief history, you'll recall that we previously had the Department of Public Works that, in addition to roads and sidewalks and so forth, had solid waste collection responsibilities. In the effort to form NDOT, which is now very successfully up and running, solid waste collection was transferred to Metro Water Services. And there were council members that had asked at the time, is that an appropriate collaboration to have Metro Water Services be responsible for solid waste collection? They have done, in my humble opinion, an outstanding job, having inherited a very large responsibility. But questions have lingered from council members and others since then. Should this be the focus of a dedicated department? It is not creating a new department. It is simply asking the question about the feasibility of having a dedicated department, and if that offers any efficiencies and advantages to its current status. I may turn to Ms. Abkowitz if there's anything she wanted to add, but that's...
Yeah, I'll just add that I think all of the questions you posed are great, and going through this kind of process and having a study that would look at all of those things that's part of what we're trying to answer. And so getting better answers to questions such as those is something that would come out of this process.
Well, I guess my thing is that why would we be doing legislation to create this? It seems like we always putting the cart before the horse. That these questions now have come since we decided to create a Department of Transportation, where we, I guess, dismantled or have the Department of Transportation oversee public works. And, you know, all of these things are those unforeseen consequences that always occur. So it's like we've got to go back and redo it again. So here it is now we've seen that there's a problem, so we're going to go back to what we used to do or decide whether that was what we should have done. And to me, that's where I seem to have a problem with following the process. And it seems to me we need to be trying to integrate more as opposed to separate. So, again, it was the decision from the administration.
Yes, it was very much administration-led and working with Metro Water Services and making sure they were comfortable with the approach. The intent here is to very much keep the cart behind the horse. Again, this does not create a new department. It is asking the question, since we have now a dedicated department that handles transportation, will we have similar advantages in creating a dedicated department to handle solid waste? The answer may be no. The answer may be the current status is the best you can possibly do. But we think it's worth at least exploring the possibility of creating a dedicated department.
So who's going to lead the effort?
Metro Water Services.
And who in the Metro Water Services?
I don't have that information yet. I think we're waiting to see if this resolution is approved. I do see Director Potter here is approaching the podium, and he may have additional information.
Director Potter, would you like to address that question?
Yes, sir. Council Lady, we retain national experts to lead us through that study to find out the best way to go forward. But we would lead that effort.
Retain Nashville? I didn't hear you.
We would retain national experts to lead us through the discussion.
Oh, so is there going to be a cost associated retaining those
Yes, ma'am.
experts? And how are we paying for that? Is that coming from Metro Water or?
It would come from the general fund, $250,000 we estimate, the waste services budget. And like Mr. Jameson said, we're not creating a department. We're studying the best way to go forward.
Director Potter, can you raise your microphone up so we can hear you? We can't hear that well. Thank you.
We're not creating an department. We're trying to find out the best way to go forward.
So I guess my thing is that was this not discussed during the time we were having problems with the waste issues some years before? And I guess I'm just trying to figure out what the urgency is and how all of it just occurred. It just seems to me that for us to be having this on the bill, something such as as important as this, especially at the end of our term. It just seems to be a little bit too much to ask at the end of the term.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurt. Councilmember Bradford.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to speak, one, in favor of this, but two, to kind of give some context. One reason I signed on and I'm supporting this was a couple years ago when we were having the discussions of separating Public Works into NDOT and everything else. I reached out and I had a meeting with the administration, with Director Potter, with Mr. Honeysucker, to have a conversation about, well, should we take this opportunity and just go ahead and create a dedicated department for waste and recycling and natural resources? And the discussion at that time was there was already multiple amendments going on the ballot for that year, and that they were concerned that another amendment, creating another department, would dilute everything. And so we've continued having these conversations. And to the point of integration, we've integrated so much into Metro Water that it's not just Metro Water anymore. They're taking care of our trash. They're taking care of our recycling. At one point, they were picking up our brush until we sent that back to NDOT. So at this point, Metro Water really isn't doing just water. And so I feel from an efficiency standpoint, let's look into splitting those departments up and having a dedicated waste and recycling department so that we can have one director, and I kind of know who I'd like to see in that chair, but one director that would be easier to work with because they're not part of one larger entity. And from the standpoint of possible funding and grants, it's always easier to have a dedicated department. And so that's why I'm rising in support of this. And I'm asking my colleagues to support this so that we can start looking into this and seeing if it is feasible to split this department into water and waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other discussion? Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. As Chair of Charter at the time that we did effectuate, or the voters did, subsequent to our passage of the DOT, I know to Council Lady Hurt's points, there was some concern in the body, like, where was this going? How would it work? And I do appreciate that we've kind of taken some time to see how it has become operationalized internal to this department, because I think it gives us a perspective for this analysis. But also to Council Lady Hurt's point, at the end of a administration and the start of another, I wonder if the administration could speak to kind of the scope of the study, the anticipated time frame. I see here as to structure and organizational framework, so I understand probably what the deliverables would be. But can somebody kind of speak to who is the point person and what the anticipated time frame is, please?
So, Council Lady, one thing I'd like to remind the Council Lady about is the legislation sunsets 30 June of 24 that put the MOU in place to put waste services at Metro Water Services. So by June 30 of next year, we have to have a decision, and that is the driving force behind this analysis, because we don't want to do it incorrectly. I am not a waste expert. John has done a spectacular job operating the division, but we need people who are nationally recognized as holistic waste experts to lead us through this discussion, to provide a recommendation to council. The end result is going to be a presentation that we'll make to council, hopefully with the mayor's support, with recommendations in order of preference. I don't have any preconceived ideas about where it's going to go. I do know that we're not experts in waste. We're good at operating, and I think we're doing a good job of operating, but we need to have some people come in and tell us how to do this nationally correctly.
So I guess, Chair, my question was just then, as the the point person assigned, right? So we have an administration sunsetting, another mayoral administration coming in. Who will be the point person as far as the scope, the deliverables, the progress of this study, and what the anticipated, I mean, obviously it has to be done well in advance of the 30 June 2024 sunset. But are we targeting 3 months, 6 months?
I want to have the recommendations to council hopefully by January, because it'll be a budget discussion point. So I don't think it's going to be really complicated as far as what the recommendations are. But once the recommendations are agreed to, that's when it gets complicated about how we're going to execute it. The recommendation, I think, is going to be pretty straightforward. And I think that needs to happen by January, because we need to have the funding discussion in the next O&M budget season.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Potter.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Any other discussion on the resolution? All right, seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, we recommend approval. Now we'll move to RS 2023-2302, Roten and other sponsors approves an application for a charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grant from TDOT to NDOT to replace, upgrade, and install new electric vehicle charging systems at various site locations throughout Nashville. Do I have a motion? Moved, properly seconded. Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just say, as a driver in an electric vehicle with a range of 60 miles, I think this is fantastic. Director Alarcon answered some questions yesterday about the quote, rip and replace, and I'm not sure if someone, can. And I would just say, for me, the biggest issue is not that some of the ones that are there are oldish, if they're still working, it's the ones that are gone or don't work. And is it possible that the priority could be put on increasing the number of working ones to the max before we start increasing ones that are, replacing ones that are simply a little bit old but still working fine?
So the placement is to the discretion of us in conjunction with the mayor's office, the Office of Sustainability. We have, preliminarily planned those locations. They obviously have to be on Metro property. But we can certainly take that into consideration as we go into those discussions.
Great. The more the better.
Some of those actually need to be upgraded because they're out of standard, and of course updating into the level 2 charging stations out there. So some of them will actually need to be, even if they are working, they will still need to be upgraded in that process.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Any other discussion? Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question was the difference, if any, and I think there should be, between these that are kind of structured or site-specific, like internal to garages, versus within the streetscape. And I think I and others may have concerns, and I know it's been complicated in other cities, about how we are locating electrical charging within the public right-of-way. And I think Councilman O'Connell and myself, in the first term, when we were looking at and kind of anticipating some of the 5G location, co-location, street lights, and then the state came in and partially preempted us as to how we can locate that stuff. We have a lot of demands on our streetscape and our public right-of-way. I am concerned about charging stations relative to walkability because of, cords are embedded under, and I just feel like we've been at fits and starts on kind of, how we're master planning some of these things. So can you speak to whether or not this is solely within existing garages at existing sites? Does this have implications on the public right-of-way? And is there any intersection, if any, because I know Ms. Abkowitz and I have spoken about in Title 17 as to our development requirements, whether that be electrical vehicle parking, bike parking, et cetera. So it's kind of a three-part question there. Thank you.
So as part of this grant, we do have 5 new installations that we are proposing to be in the curb space, on-street level 2 charging stations. Those stations have not been selected, but we anticipate them being near multi-unit dwellings. And obviously, we will work directly with traffic and parking, if they impact the function of the roadway, making sure that it's safe and accommodates pedestrian movement. So making sure we don't have any obstructions. But yeah, that will definitely be part of the planning process. As you know, we're doing the Connect Downtown study. As part of that, we've done a massive asset collection process, curb space asset collection process. So this actually is helping us right now as we're looking at that data and seeing where possible these 5 new stations could be located.
Okay, Chair, may I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so regarding the installations in the public right-of-way, I appreciate that we're kind of starting small, and this is grant-based, and we'll learn something from these. But I think I always like us to begin as we intend to go, and what I get nervous about, just because of, it's one thing to move a parking kiosk here or there, but as we build out our bikeable network, whether at the core or beyond that, I've always become concerned that, when we start to formalize any sort of electrical vehicle parking, and then it's like, oh, actually, we want to make a bikeway connection here, and then it's kind of a big hullabaloo. Yeah. It's already, from my perspective, Chair, as our representative on the Traffic and Parking Commission, sometimes difficult to remove on-street parking, and that's not on-street parking that, electric vehicle owners rely on. So can you kind of speak to that? Do you perceive these to be in a piloting type space, or?
Before moving forward, yes. I mean, we are looking at it as an incremental, pilot. We have these 5 to pilot, and we will work hand in hand with making sure it corresponds with our walk bike plan, making sure it coordinates with what we've collected and policies that we're establishing as part of Connect Downtown. So yes, we will be doing that and making sure we are not doing this in a silo, even internally within NDOT, making sure we're talking to the other programs to make sure we aren't setting up a situation like you expressed, where we're setting up ourselves for a challenging situation in the future where we'll have to go back and remove a station. That's what we do not want to happen. So that's how we're approaching.
Okay, and I appreciate that. So then the 5 installations that you mentioned that were within the public right-of-way, then are we also doing replacements internal to metro garages and so forth?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And then lastly, Chair, the third part of the question was from Ms. Abkowitz as to our development standards in Title 17 related to electric vehicles, and if there's any intersection with this grant.
Not specifically with this grant, although the conversation still continues about opportunities to incentivize multiple modes of transportation that are more sustainable than single occupancy combustion engines. I know that there's work ongoing within the design studio and planning to look at the bonus height program within the downtown code. And there's been great dialogue about how we can, again, incentivize multimodal transit as well as EV infrastructure. And so I think that's going to spark a more comprehensive dialogue about what we need to be doing as a city in that space with standards.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Abkowitz.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Any other discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Resolution we recommend for approval. Now we'll move to RS 2023-2304. Roten and other sponsors authorizes the Metropolitan Department of Water and Sewage Services to enter into a recycling technology pilot program with Sensenio and to accept a donation of $14,000 for hardware integration, temporary licensing, and services associated with the program. Do I have a motion? Moved and properly seconded. Any questions on the resolution? Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Waste Services. I have understood due to some challenges about kind of repeated misses particular to the recycling part of our waste collection that we administer, that some of those challenges have been technology related from a routing perspective. Is this related to some of our routing challenges? And can you just speak to specifically what this will fund? What is the technology, please?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this in 2 parts. We do have pretty old routing software, and one thing that we've been doing, and this is related but also separate, is to pilot some programs that are out there, some of the technologies that's out there that includes modern routing, routing that can be downloaded to a tablet or a phone so that the driver in the field or the employees in the field will be able to see, here are missed pickups, or here's where I need to go to repair carts, and to be able to do it very efficiently, as opposed to now where we give them a piece of paper with addresses on it and they're trying to figure out what's the most efficient way. So we are actually in our second pilot program on the routing software that council had approved some months back. And this one is a little different. Well, let me back up and say, once we finish the pilot programs, we are going to be working with our finance folks at Water to move forward and get technology that will help to eliminate little things like somebody who lives in an area with alley collection, but their address doesn't actually connect to the alley in any way. They get missed a lot because the trucks know they're supposed to go down the alley, and this one random address in a neighborhood is hard for people to remember. Now, if there's a regular driver, that driver will remember. If somebody else fills in, they're going to forget. So our goal with technology is to improve service, is to make it more efficient, to ensure we don't have issues like we've had there on Hobbs Road. Believe me, we had a prayer meeting about it, and I'm pretty sure they got picked up today. But this technology is going to help us do a lot of different things. This particular one that's here today is a pretty new technology. I'm going to let Jen talk a bit more about it because she's sort of our subject matter expert. But it's going to help us reduce contamination in recycling. So it's different than the routing, but every bit as valuable, because the more we can reduce contamination, the less we're paying for the disposal of the contamination that people put in their carts. And Jen Hartman.
So so the contamination piece of this, the way it works is that there are cameras that are inside the hopper of our trucks. So whenever you dump recycling into the truck, you can see what's going in there. So what this technology will do is, using artificial intelligence, be able to identify specific contaminants. So for us, that's things like bagged recycling or just plastic bags. It could be hoses and other things that are not recyclable that right now we don't necessarily do education right at the cart, because to inspect every single cart for 110,000 households would take a lot of staff and a lot of capacity. This is an opportunity to use technology to help us identify that contamination, where we can then turn that around. We'll get a spreadsheet after every day that will give us the information of, it'll geolocate. So it's not looking at the house, it's just looking in the truck. It'll geolocate the truck where it was at when it picked that up, and then let us know what that contamination was and send us a picture. So from that, we're going to be able to develop more robust mailings that we can send out directly to those residents that are that have put that contamination in the recycling, so that moving forward, they know what they're supposed to do and what they might be doing wrong.
Chair Pulley, could I ask, is it mostly then just bagged recycling? I mean, it's not to a level of like, oh, you did a plastic berry, whatever, right? Like, I mean, it's mostly going to be like bagged, unbagged, or something that's really majorly not supposed to be, right? So,
yes, and this is, since this is new technology, they're focusing on, and we're focusing on with them, specific contaminants that are major issues for our recycling. There is opportunity in other places where you see things like batteries and, things that have the potential to be hazardous or explosive or could set on, the truck on fire. Those are also things that you can utilize this technology for. We'll be focusing those, since our issues really are those, the bagged recycling and some of these larger contaminants we'll be able to identify. It'll be really interesting to see how that works and what we can see through this.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Hurt.
So I'm just not clear. Is the Sensonio, are they the ones giving the $14,000 donation?
Yes.
And they're also the ones that's doing the pilot program?
Yes, ma'am.
So would they be expecting to be the one to execute the program if we find that it's it is good, or are we going to look to do some kind of RFP?
Yeah, we would need to, for one like the artificial intelligence, we would need to do some sort of solicitation around that. We can't just contract with them directly.
So that is clear with them that...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, these folks are reaching out to other cities because it's, as Jen said, it's new technology. They're trying to get people to try it out. San Antonio, for example, has tried out something. It's not theirs, but it's something similar because there's a lot of folks in that space trying to help reduce contamination and make it easier for folks like Jen and I to identify and educate people.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurt. Any other discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? We recommend approval. Now we're on to bills on second reading, and we do have a consent agenda. I'll read those by number, and we can pull at the end of that reading. We'll then read the captions, and you'll have another opportunity to pull them from consent if you'd like. BL 2023-1993, 1997, 1998, 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, and that's the end of the second reading consent agenda. Do any of those need to come off? Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we pull 1993?
Yes, ma'am. We sure can. Any others? All right. I will now read the consent agenda. BL 2023-1997, wrote and other sponsors, authorizes the acquisition of certain rights-of-way easements and property rights for use by NDOT in connection with the public project described as the Estes Road at Hobbs Road intersection improvements. BL 2023-1998, Withers and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept new public sanitary sewer main and sanitary sewer manhole for 6 properties located on Woods Street. BL 2023-1999, Welsh and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept the relocation of an existing public fire hydrant assembly for property located at 2918B Harlan Drive. BL 2023-2000, Withers and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept a new public sanitary sewer manhole for property located at 1010 4th Avenue North. BL 2023-2001, Johnston and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept a new public water main and fire hydrant assembly for property located at 3777 Nolensville Pike. BL 2023-2002, Withers and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept a new sanitary sewer manhole and easement for 2 properties located at 1036 and 1042 East Trinity Lane. BL 2023-2003, Pulley and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to abandon existing sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manhole and easements, and to accept new public sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manhole and easements for 2 properties located at 4310 and 4311 Castleman Court. And that's the end of consent agenda. Do any of those items need to come off? Seeing none, any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? The consent agenda passes. Now let's go back to BL 2023-1869, Pulley and other sponsors, amends Title VI, Chapter 77, Article 1 of the Metropolitan Code regarding renewal of entertainment, transportation certificates of public necessity and convenience, and entertainment transportation vehicle permits. Motion? Moved and properly seconded. All right. I would like for a member of the committee to make this motion. If not, I'll do it myself. But I'd like to defer this for 2 meetings, and I'll tell you the explanation. We are working through these amendments that have been proposed, and also a substitute that we want to offer, and there are some legal issues we're trying to work out so that we can have a proper discussion on those. So my proposal is that we defer 2 meetings on this issue. Councilmember Bradford, you're up first.
Motion to defer 2 meetings.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the deferral motion? Seeing none, all in favor of deferring this 2 meetings?
Aye.
Any opposed? Then we recommend deferral of 2 meetings. Now, BL 2023-1882, O'Connell and other sponsors creates Chapter 2.153 of the Metropolitan Code establishing a Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. Do I have a motion? Moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Allen would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am a representative of the Greenways Commission, and the Greenways Commission and the Greenways for Nashville Organization and Parks have been hoping to get a meeting put together, and unfortunately, it didn't come together last week. So they have asked for a deferral so that we can continue to work on the amendment. It is in the packet. I am getting some good feedback on it, which is helpful, and certainly, and I'm not guaranteeing it will be the same amendment in 2 weeks, but my goal is to have this amendment fleshed out with the input that I'm receiving and at this next meeting, and to be ready to move forward on the second meeting, July 18th. And I have mentioned this to the lead sponsor, and he was okay.
Are you?
So I'm moving for a 1 meeting deferral, please.
There's a motion on the floor for a 1 meeting deferral, properly seconded. Any discussion on the deferral motion? Seeing none, all are in favor of a 1 meeting deferral?
Aye.
Any opposed? We recommend a 1 meeting deferral on this bill. BL 2023-1993, Allen and other sponsors, amends Chapter 10.20, Waste Management, and Title 16, Buildings and Construction of the Metropolitan Code to add the requirement that construction and demolition materials be diverted from landfills. Do I have a motion? Moved, properly seconded. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Likewise, I will say that Sharon Smith and Jen Harmon have done an amazing job of creating lots of opportunities for public input, but there's nothing like filing a bill to get folks to start paying attention. And so there are some groups that have asked for an opportunity to meet one more time, and then there may be some amendments, or that may settle the issue. But again, I would like to ask for a 1 meeting deferral on this one as well.
So there's a motion for a 1 meeting deferral on the floor. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the deferral motion? Seeing none, all in favor of a 1 meeting deferral?
Aye.
All opposed? We recommend 1 meeting deferral. Now we're on to bills on third reading. And we do have a consent agenda, and I'll read them by number. If anybody needs to pull any, just let me know. BL 2023-1887, 1895, 1896, 1897, 1898, 1899, 1900, 1901, 1902, 1903, 1904, 1905, 1906, 1907, 1908, 1909, and 1910. Do any of those need to come off of the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will read the captions. You'll have another opportunity to pull at that time if you should change your mind. BL 2023-1887, Rutherford and other sponsors, amends ordinance number BL 2021-594 to authorize lowering the speed limit on streets designated as local streets on the major and collector street plan within the General Services District from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour, allowing exceptions to that general reduction to be granted by the Metropolitan Traffic and Parking Commission, and amends Section 12.20.020 of the Metropolitan Code. BL 2023-1895, Hauser and other sponsors authorize the granting of a permanent utility easement to Piedmont Natural Gas Company on certain property owned by the Metropolitan government. BL 2023-1896, Parker and others sponsors, authorizes acquisition of certain rights-of-way, easements, and property rights for use by the NDOT in connection with the public project described as early acquisition of right-of-way to include 6 parcels for Phase 1 north/south arterial boulevard between Spring Street and Woodland Street. BL 2023-1897, Hancock and other sponsors amends the Geographic Information System street and alley centerline layer for the Metropolitan government by abandoning a portion of Pawnee Trail unimproved right-of-way. BL 2023-1898, Evans and other sponsors authorize the Metropolitan government to accept a new public sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manholes, fire hydrant assemblies, and easements for property located at 840 Old Lebanon Dirt Road. BL 2023-1899, Taylor and other sponsors authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept the relocation and replacement of public water main for property located at 401 Clay Street, BL 2023-1900. Roten and other sponsors authorize the Metropolitan government to accept new public water and sanitary sewer mains, 500 assemblies, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for properties located at 3739 Hoggett Ford Road. BL 2023-1901, Sledge and other sponsors authorize the Metropolitan government to abandon existing public storm sewer pipeline and easement for property located at 2212 12th Avenue South. BL 2023-1902, Roten and other sponsors authorize the Metropolitan government to accept new public sanitary sewer mains, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for property located at 3507 Central Pike. BL 2023-1903, Syracuse and other sponsors authorize the Metropolitan government to accept the relocation of an existing public fire hydrant assembly for property located at 433 Opry Mills Drive. BL 2023-1904, Toombs and other sponsors authorize the Metropolitan government to accept a new public sanitary sewer manhole and easement for two properties located at 1011 and 1013 West Trinity Lane. BL 2023-1905, Withers and other sponsors authorize the Metropolitan government to accept new public sanitary sewer main and sanitary sewer manholes for property located at 1219 11th Avenue North. BL 2023-1906, Withers and other sponsors authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept public new sanitary sewer force main and rehabilitation of existing sanitary sewer manholes for 4 properties located on Rural Hill Road, Montview Road, and Highlander Drive. BL 2023-1907, Bradford and other sponsors authorize the Metropolitan government to accept the new public water and sanitary sewer mains and sanitary sewer manholes for property located at 1287 Curry Road. BL 2023-1908, Toombs and other sponsors authorizes the Metropolitan government to abandon existing public sanitary sewer mains and sanitary sewer manholes and to accept new public sanitary sewer mains and sanitary sewer manholes for 8 properties located on Ewing Drive, Dickerson Pike, and Ben Allen Road. BL 2023-1909, Withers and other sponsors authorize the Metropolitan government to accept new public water and sanitary sewer mains, fire hydrant assemblies, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for 2 properties located at 5991 and 5997 Edmondson Pike. BL 2023-1910, Porterfield and other sponsors authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept new public sanitary sewer main and adjustment of sanitary sewer manholes for property located at 455 Rural Hill Road. That is the consent agenda. Does anything need to come off? Seeing none. Yes, Councilmember Henderson. Which one? 1887, did you say? Okay. Very first one. Any others? All right. We will pull 1887. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of the consent agenda? Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. Now we'll move to BL 2023-1887. Rutherford and other sponsors amends ordinance number BL 2021-594 to authorize lowering the speed limit on streets designated as local streets on the major and collector street plan within the general services district from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour, allowing exceptions to that general reduction to be granted by the Metropolitan Traffic and Parking Commission, and amend section 12.20.020 of the Metropolitan Code. Do I have a motion? Bill's moved and property seconded. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in the and others. So this is a supportive removal from consent, and I do thank the sponsor, Councilman Rutherford. Conversations about this had come up way back in the policy committee of the first walk and bike strategic plan back in 2016. So I'm glad to see this getting across the finish line here at the end of the term. I brought this up at Traffic and Parking Commission, and I know we've talked with council staff because there is just a little bit of confusion, Chair, and I just want to kind of formalize it for the record as to kind of the path of of work that where the Traffic and Parking Commission intersect with this committee, with the department, council-generated policy, department-generated policy, and I do think we need to kind of look at those pathways just for clarity purpose. But again, I do appreciate the sponsor advancing this. And then I just wanted to put on the record as well a question that I believe I posed at Traffic and Parking Commission colleagues when this was before us, and the commission did approve this unanimously. And it relates to collector streets, Chair. So yourself and I and Council Lady Murphy have taken some of our collectors internal to District 25 and 34, like Abbott Martin, Hobbs, Estes Road, that are pretty narrow two-lane collectors, that we've had broad community support about bringing those default speed limits from 35 to 30. And just from an order of operations, I had anticipated that we would adjust our collector speeds to align with our local speeds in our USD before we moved to this general services district improvement. Again, highly supportive of this and appreciate the sponsor, but I just wonder if NDOT can speak to that collector effort and how we're going to keep all this in alignment, please. Because in the GSD especially, some of those collectors are particularly high speed. So, 25 versus, some of these 35 and 40 mile per hour collectors, the speeds are getting pretty far apart there. So can you speak to that, please?
Yes, I can. So we are evaluating those, our collectors, as far as even looking at instances where we can actually use traffic calming on some collectors, depending on the context of the collector. Not every collector is the same, as we find it's hard just to put things in buckets and say, this is a collector, this is a local road. The traffic conditions are unique to the situation, so we are evaluating those. Efforts are ongoing. I can't tell you right now what a timeline would be for actually bringing another ordinance or to traffic and parking, but we will go through traffic and parking to do that actually, if in the future we move that direction.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I guess my question, this would just then be kind of from an order of operations standpoint, because I think, Chair Pulley, you and I both represent a satellite city. Satellite cities administer their own speed limits, and we found sometimes some difficulty because satellite cities are in the general services district, and so there has been some confusion, I think, in satellite cities thinking that this might apply to them, or rather citizens of satellite cities. And so I guess my question would be, I think that's a piece of this with our speed limit. So it's great that we're getting our locals in GSD down to 25. I would suggest the next conversation that needs to happen would be around collaboration, because there are streets in my district, and Council Pulley, I'm not sure about yourself, where it starts in Metro as a local street as 25, and then it becomes a 30 mile per hour local in a satellite city. I have attempted to foster conversations for continuity, but different satellite cities are more receptive or not. And so there's that piece of it. And then there's the two-lane collectors that I would assert and think that maybe we just need to do kind of a county-wide approach to that. While I do appreciate you're talking about traffic calming on those two-lane collectors. So can you just speak then to kind of order of operations? Would you want to lower the collectors first, or do the kind of catch up with our satellite cities?
We would actually like to work with the satellite cities first as far as an order of operation. It's a great point that you bring up. We have several roads that go in and out of our jurisdiction. So for consistency, I believe we would work with our partners in those other incorporated areas to make sure we have consistency and have buy-in from them when we're making these changes. So yeah, that to my mind is the order of operations to go through, so we can have that consistency.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then lastly, Chair, because it is related to communication upon passage of this to the sponsor, Councilman Rutherford. So the conversations that I facilitated was where a satellite city abutted the Metro USD, where we lowered the 25 mile per hour, right? So that was a USD GSD abutting going from 25 to 35. We're going to, I would assume at this juncture, have some of the same things happen again, where the GSD surrounds a satellite city, and then so it's 25 and 30 and so forth. And so I made a point last time to anticipate and do some very intentional communication. And so I just wanted to ask, who is going to do that communication this time? Is that on NDOT to do?
Yes, yeah, we will take the lead on that communication with the local, with the other.
Okay, so subsequent to passage, you will outline kind of a timeline and invite them to maybe coordinate? Yes. Okay, just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Any other questions relative to this bill? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. That concludes our agenda. Any other issues you want to bring before the committee before we adjourn? Seeing none, we are officially adjourned. Thank you.